It takes about 18 months from the start of production to when the car is finished. During this time, the car will go through hundreds of quality control checks. But how do they make sure that each one of these steps is done right? Let's find out how the world's most luxurious cars are really made. In order to build a car as luxurious as the S-Class, Mercedes needs to make sure that every single part is absolutely perfect before it goes into the car. So for example, if you take a look at this door, this piece of metal has gone through several robotic arms that have stamped and shaped the metal just right. And after this process, there isn't a single mark or scratch on the entire door. In fact, in order to get a door this perfect, Mercedes spends over $60 million on tooling, which is why you never see any marks or scratches on your brand new car's doors. But what about the paint? You can't just slap some paint on a car and expect it to look good. The paint needs to be applied in the perfect conditions. This is why the paint shop is one of the biggest and most expensive parts of the factory. And the reason why there aren't any imperfections in the paint is because the robots that apply the paint move at 24 kilometers per hour, which is 15 miles per hour, and they apply the paint in a 200 micrometer layer. And in order to achieve a perfect finish, the robots must apply the paint with an air pressure of 3 bar, which is around 45 psi. That way, the paint will stick to the car better. But what happens if the robot applies too much paint or too little paint? Well, there are sensors along the body that measure exactly how much paint has been applied. And if it's too little or too much, the sensors will tell the robot to either apply more or less paint. And even though these cars are fully loaded with the latest technology, they still need to be driven by a human being. That's why after the first robot has assembled the car goes on a test track where engineers test drive the car and make sure everything is working properly. But what if something isn't working properly? Well, that's what the next phase is for. After the test track, the car goes to the quality control where robots and humans check every single thing about the car. They check everything from the interior to the exterior. They even check things that you wouldn't even think of, like the gap between the doors. It needs to be just right. The robot arms that assemble the car are so precise that the gap between the doors is exactly the same on all 4 doors. In fact, the gap between all the panels on the car is exactly the same all around the car. And the quality control doesn't just check the size of the gaps, they also check if the gaps are straight. And the way they do this is by putting a special tool in the gap and then they pull it out. If the tool comes out without scratching, then the gap is straight. And speaking of the gaps, another thing that the quality control does is that they shine a bright light into the gaps to see if there are any imperfections. And after the exterior checks are done, they move on to the interior. Here they check the seats, the steering wheel, and all the other components in the interior. If they find anything that isn't perfect, then the car gets sent back to the assembly line where workers fix it. And once the interior is perfect, the car goes on to the next phase. Now the car is basically complete, but there are still a few things that need to be done. For example, the windows need to be installed, and since the S-Class is a very luxurious car, the windows are triple glazed and they even have a special film on them that blocks out any unwanted heat. After the windows are installed, the car goes to the final assembly where the bumpers, the mirrors, and all the other small parts are added to the car. And finally, after all this hard work, the car is ready to be driven off the assembly line. But before that, the workers take a bow and take a picture with the car because they know they have made a great car and they are proud of it. Now you know how the world's most luxurious cars are made. But do you know what the cheapest car is? Comment below.